I think that what I've learned through Suzuki and the pedagogy is that it's the consistency of every day. It's the no drama, no extremes. It's just part of your day. And that if you add up those days over the years, that's what takes you to excellence. That repetition equals excellence.
Welcome to the Time to Practice podcast. This is a space where we talk about music practice, the ups and downs that young musicians go through related to practice and learning music, and how we as parents, caregivers, and music educators can support the young musicians in our lives, support ourselves, and support each other. My name is Christine Goodner. I'm a music educator, author, and podcaster who has made it my mission to talk about music practice and to support educators and families looking to make home practice more effective and to reduce conflict and frustration in the practice room. I'm glad you're here. A short PSA, be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen so you get automatic updates when a new episode is published. This is one of the simple ways you can help support this community-driven project. Speaking of that, you can now find us on YouTube. The handle is at Time to Practice Pod. And since I've just started, I just have a handful of subscribers there right now. So I would love your help to grow and reach my first 100 subscribers and then, eventually more. So I will put a link to find me there in the show notes. All right, on to today's episode. Welcome to episode 99. I'm excited today to bring you one of our monthly conversations about music practice from a guest expert. And this week we have bassist and music educator Sherry Luchette. Here is a bit of her background, which comes from her website. Sherry Luchette is an accomplished LA bassist playing jazz, rock, blues, and classical style music. In addition to being an accomplished musician, Sherry is also an acclaimed music educator and author. She teaches jazz bass and young musicians classes at the Pasadena Conservatory of Music. Sherry has authored the Flying Jazz Kittens series, a collection of 3 elementary jazz music education books. And Sherry is here today to share with us some of her favorite tips about music practice. I believe she's our first bassist to be on the podcast, so it's exciting to have her here, and I can't wait for her to share those tips with you. Let's jump in. Well, welcome everyone. I'm excited today to be talking to Sherry Luchette. And Sherry and I met recently at the Oregon Suzuki Institute, where she was teaching bass and improvisation, jazz improvisation classes. And it was really wonderful to connect. And fun fact, we found out we had both had something published in the same American Suzuki Journal each other, right? But we had never really met or interacted. So it was super fun to connect.
Right.
And you gave a great talk at the Institute, Sherry, about practice tips and tricks that we're going to talk about today, because it'd be wonderful for everyone to get to hear that couldn't be there live. So thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to start off by just having you share anything you'd like to about who you are and what you do in the world of music. I talked a bit about what you did at OSI, but what else would you like to share?
Well, right now I'm teaching at the Pasadena Conservatory in Pasadena, California, and I do a lot with adults as well. I have the Adult Jazz Studies program that I run, and then I also have lots of bass students, and then I have a jazz class for kids ages 4 to 7 called the Flying Jazz Kittens, or that's where the materials come from, my books that are called the Flying Jazz Kittens. And then I use those materials and adapt them for private students, for my adult students, like the same type of materials work at all age levels with some tweaks.
I love that. And then I was telling you, I don't think we've had a bassist on the podcast before,
Oh,
so
cool.
I'm excited to have you here.
Yay. That's exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. And how old were you? I'm just curious, how old were you when you first started learning music? And did you start on the bass? I guess I'm curious about
Yeah,
that too.
so I did not start on the bass. I was an ear kid and I played a lot of instruments by ear with no formal instruction for a while. I played some piano. I started violin for probably a couple of months and then moved, and that didn't work out. And then I played flute, I played bass clarinet and tenor saxophone and euphonium in the high school band, and then landed on electric bass and really liked the bass. Didn't really know about the upright bass at that time, but I taught myself to read bass clef and got uh, practiced and took some lessons with some guitar teachers on electric bass. And then I started to play musicals at different high schools around the area. And that's sort of where I came from, it coming kind of through the back door, not a lot of formal training, but self-taught. And I also learned a little bit about chords. And then when I did finally meet my bass teacher at the local university, um, he, started me with walking bass lines and writing bass lines, and then asked me, "How are your grades?" And I said, "Oh, they're good." And so he said, "Okay, well, how would you like to come here and play the upright bass?" And I said, "Well, that's only my dream is to go to music school." But I did not have that formal training. So there was nowhere that was going to take me. So he took me. And we started at the beginning with classical bass, no jazz for 2 years, all just fundamentals. So I actually stayed in my undergraduate degree for 6 years because I had to catch up. And then, so I did come into it from a different way, but that's okay because
Mhm.
here we are.
Yeah. No, I think it's so valuable to hear people's stories who are not maybe what people expect or not the typical
Yeah,
path because everybody's path does not look the same when I talk to a lot of musicians. And it's really important to know that we have a lot of parents of music students that listen to this podcast. And sometimes it can feel like a lot of pressure
yes,
that our path has to look a certain way or my child is doomed or something like this.
no,
And really, there's just a lot of ways people get into music. I really glad you're sharing your story.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There is not just one right way to do it. If you're determined and there's a lot that has to do with your motivation too, and as well, and because a lot of information is free out there now, it's just what you do with it.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I had on my list of questions to ask you just, did you always like to practice? But something was driving you to keep figuring out these instruments by ear and self-teaching yourself. Do you remember what that felt like to you or what motivated you when you were young?
Um, I just, I don't know. I don't think I really thought it through when I was younger. I think it was just something kind of fun to do because I wanted to play in the band and figure it out.
Mm.
Or a band director may have said, "Hey, would you play this for me?" Because sometimes they were trying to get students to switch to less popular instruments. And I was just that kid that was like, "Yeah, okay, sure." But I think it was just there's probably some curiosity there and wanting to figure something out.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And some social situations that you got to be in with music, maybe that felt kept it interesting or, oh, try this. And then you were willing.
Yeah, it was just like kind of a place to belong too, because I wasn't a super athletic kid. So that was sort of my way of trying to find something to do.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us love music partly because of the people we get to surround ourselves and make music with. Making music with other people's. There's something magical about that that
Yeah,
draws a lot of us in.
definitely.
Oh, I love that. And then I was curious what made you want to be a professional musician, but it sounded like you found the right professor at the right time. You kind of took you under their wing, and that's how that opportunity came to pass.
Yes. It was not short of miraculous. And I think I knew when I was about 14 or 15 that I really wanted to do it. I just loved the sound of the bass, and
Mm.
that's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to play the bass. And I just decided I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I was going to figure it out.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
And I imagine if we're the college professor meeting a kid like that who's really clearly got a passion and a drive for it. I can imagine that would motivate someone
Yeah.
who's willing to take you under their wing. I mean, it seemed like you had the right
Yeah.
ingredients there to meet the right person at the right
Yeah, the
time.
perfect storm in a good
Yeah, I
way.
love that. I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing some of that. I think it does help just to hear everybody's different story and know that our child's, if we're a parent coaching a child through this process, it might be hard to tell what that story is when we're in the middle of it, but it's helpful to hear that these things come together. So I appreciate that. So when we were talking at the beginning of our conversation about the talk you gave at the Oregon Suzuki Institute about practice, and I'm excited to hear what you can share with us and your some of your ideas about music practice that you share with students and that you shared with the families at the institute.
Sure. So because was telling you that I was an ear person and I started late, when I got to music school, I felt very behind and very, I knew that there were kids that were light years ahead of my abilities. And so I actually practiced out of fear of not being good enough. And that motivation stayed with me, and still I find sometimes that I battle it even now. And I think that that's a very common scenario with many people, is that they practice because they're afraid that they're not going to be good enough, or they're comparing themselves to someone else. And these are, I think, very human tendencies. And while there's an element of fear that can motivate us all to change because it's not a comfortable feeling, I found that in the bigger picture, in the long haul, it's not the way that you want to practice, because it leads to a lot of perfectionism and just, it has to be all or nothing kind of mentality. Like either I'm going to practice 5 hours a day or I'm walking away, and it's kind of encourages extremes. And I think that what I've learned through Suzuki and the pedagogy is that it's the consistency of every day. It's the no drama, no extremes. It's just part of your day. And that if you add up those days over the years, that's what takes you to excellence. That repetition equals excellence. And that it's actually can be done in a very calm, kind of matter of fact way. I wish I would have known that when I was in college. I would have probably done even better, but I know that now. So a lot of my tips and tricks are kind of surrounding promoting that scenario of, okay, let's talk about how much time do you actually have each day that you'd be willing to practice, because it's not easy. And I don't think that it's always particularly fun. It just depends. Sometimes you can get into things and have fun with it. But, a lot of times we're alone when we're practicing, and it can feel kind of isolating. And if someone just says, go practice, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? So, one of the things that I've developed is, I call it my base practice plan. And I actually designed a sheet that I give to every student when they come in for their lesson. We put their name on it. We write what their warm-ups are going to be. If they're working on scales, what scales they're going to practice, and then the songs, and what about the songs are they going to practice? Are they going to practice an entire song? Are they going to practice certain measures? And everything is written out according to the time frame that the student says they can commit to. I had one student, she told me, I can do 8 minutes a day. I said, okay. And so I broke down her assignments to cover 8 minutes, because I know that 8 minutes a day is better than cramming 30 minutes one day in the week and then coming in for your lesson. So, and it seems to be working, because then people, I think students know that they're not being judged or like, why didn't you practice? Because that's another thing. I think people feel kind of ashamed or embarrassed if they don't practice at this certain mysterious number of minutes a day. I mean, there can be suggestions, but then there's also real life and what students can actually handle. And that's what I'm interested in, is knowing really what can you really handle. Let's like be honest about it. And I'm not judging you, but tell me so that we can make something where you can stick with it and then you can feel successful. So that's probably the one
Mm.
big thing that I start students off with is, you're going to have a plan each week, and we're going to divide that plan by minutes of what to work on so that you have a beginning and an end when you go to practice by yourself, instead of just, I'm going to go and just do whatever for however long. That's so scary. When there's no end, it just feels very overwhelming. So this way, there's a plan. And then when you're done, if you want to keep going, go for it. If not, you did what you needed to do for the day.
Mm.
And you can have that sense of accomplishment.
Yeah, exactly. And I can think of people listening, maybe thinking like, oh, 8 minutes wouldn't be enough for my child and feeling stressed. But I think also you and I know if there in reality is more time, often just getting started is very hard.
Very.
And once students get going, and if they start to see, oh, this is feeling satisfying because it's like you're saying, it has a beginning and an end, it could expand from there.
Yes.
And I think knowing that helps.
Yeah, yeah, very well. It could expand. And when I said 8 minutes, I mean, that's for that student. So everybody's different. And I had another student tell me, like, one day they might go for 2 hours, and another day they can't stand it for more than like 12 minutes and they're done. And so this is just being real. This is humans. These are human beings. And not everybody can be 30 minutes every day. I'm sure there are students that can, and that's great. That's so amazing. But then there's a lot of other people. And if they're struggling with practicing, then definitely 5 minutes a day is better than nothing, right? So sometimes we have to start small and build up if we're learning what it feels like to practice. I think some people are a little bit more naturally able to practice easier than others. I know that I really struggled with it for a while, like I said. But I'm sure there are students that don't as much, that just sort of get into it. And that's great. Hopefully they can share their their mindset,
Sure.
when they're in that zone. That would be great to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of the other things that I do besides the base practice plan is that I have repetition games. So I'll have students, I take my little stuffed animals, I have these little stuffed cats, and I'll pull them out of the bag and I'll say, okay, if we're going to look at a passage, and I want you to play this passage as correctly as you possibly can. I don't like to say perfect. I think that perfect is kind of an illusion, because there's nothing really to do with that word, because perfect is kind of in the eye of the beholder. So I tell them, play it as correct as you can. And then, in my case with my stuffed kitties, kitty goes over in the bag. And then we do it again. And if it's a good, correct practice, the second kitty goes over into the bag. And then we go to the third time, and let's say there's a mistake, or something different. And then I'll ask the student, what happened? What do you think it was that was a little off? And I might say, oh, I missed that shift. I was a little sharp, or I overshifted. I'll say, okay, great. So now the kitties all come back out of the bag, and we start again until we get 3 in a row. But I think it's a fun way to do repetition. And it also gives students a chance to be a little bit more objective with themselves when there is a mistake, rather than, oh my gosh, the world is over. Instead, you just say, okay, well, all right, I made the note. I tended to overshift on that note. So now I'm going to go again and try not to overshift, and just keep doing it until you get those three in a row, or it could be a 5-time game, or it could be a 10-time game, depending on the passage. So I've had a lot of success with that because that makes it a little bit more fun to repeat passages.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then we'll go back, and after doing kind of a micro practice on a certain thing, I'd like to let the student play the whole song after that, because that's a very satisfying feeling after you've isolated a certain area that you're targeting to just go ahead and play through without stopping. Can be very satisfying and kind of go feel like an accomplishment.
Right. Right. And I think sometimes people come to lessons and they do feel like, I want to show the teacher I can do this correctly. And then we can have a misconception that at home when we practice, everything's supposed to go correctly all the time. And, practice, I think, if someone's not a musician and they're helping their child practice, it's good to know that it's a messy process. We're going to make mistakes.
Sure.
And I love what you said about just like, oh, what happened there? Can I figure out what went awry? And then,
How to make it better. Yeah, yeah. And instead of looking for perfect, we're going to just try and be more correct, as accurate as we can be, and then move on.
yeah, and problem solve a bit. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then just move on. That's always the key anyways. Just keep moving forward. Don't give up. Keep moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I like that your three cats game. There's like again, there's a beginning and an end, right? So it's like, okay, we did this three times. We can revisit this tomorrow or whenever, but it
Yes.
doesn't go on forever.
Yeah, and then some of the other tricks are just, and I'm sure many students already do this, but having a timer on so you know when your 10 or 15 or 30 minutes are up. Um, I think practice sheets are really fun where you can visually put a sticker saying, yes, I practiced today, and have some kind of chart at home. Um, I think doing it earlier in the day is usually better, because then it's done and it can be checked off the list. Sometimes that's the main motivation, but at least it gets done, because when we get to the end of our school day and there's homework and people are tired or they have a sports practice, it can get really difficult to then go over to your instrument and practice. So I think the earlier that it can be done, the better, generally speaking. I think having like maybe a long-term reward is kind of fun. Like if a student finishes a Suzuki book or a solo piece or another milestone, they might, get a special meal at home, or a small toy, or a cool new stuffed animal, something like that. Um, and then the other thing that I offer is I let my students know that if they're stuck on something during the week and they don't remember how to do something, that they need to have their parents or themselves text me and tell me what it is that they don't understand. And I can send them a video, or I can hop on FaceTime and show them, because with today's technology, it's so easy to do that and it's so quick. There's really no excuse to wait a whole week saying, well, I don't remember. It's like you can be proactive and ask me, because I told them I'm not, if I don't get back to you right away, it's because something has come up, but I will, I will get back to you. And so I have had a few students do that, which I think is great, because then it clears up any misunderstanding that, or whatever they don't remember. So I encourage my students to be in touch if they need to, and not to feel bad about it and not to feel shy about it, but just reach out if there's something that you just can't figure out. Don't wait, in other words, don't wait the whole week and then come back and go, those are some of the big things that I like to use with students to help them have some kind of practice routine.
I love that. I love that. And at first, when you were talking about the bass practice, I was thinking like upright bass, but you're maybe saying like BASE, like the bass level, or can you say more about what you're calling that?
Oh, BASS. Yeah, my bass practice plan. Yeah.
Okay, it is like the
Yeah,
instrument.
it's
Yes,
for the
great.
instrument because they're all bass
Got
players,
it.
right? So, and
Yes, yes.
exactly. And so we're going to have, for the bass, because it's such a physical instrument, um, sometimes in the beginning years, some students cross over, or many students with bass tend to have played something prior. That's not an
Mm,
unusual scenario, although we'd love to see more 3 and 4 year olds start because we have small but very small bases that can be used to teach them. But a lot of my students played other things or do play other things. And so when they come over to the light, just kidding, yeah,
I love it.
when they come and play bass, a lot of them have some general musical knowledge already. And what happens with bass is that it's kind of a slow burn from the physical standpoint of playing the with the bow, playing pizzicato, pressing down on the fingerboard. These things are very physical, and the body needs time to create calluses and build up hand muscle. So sometimes their brains know what to do, but their hands aren't cooperating, and that disjunct can happen for, I think, up to about 3 to 6 months even. So your body needs time to catch up with your brain. And not every instrument is like that. But the bass, it is. And so warm ups are really very important on the bass as part of their practice plan because they have to warm up their hands because we don't want anybody having some kind of physical problems with their hands or shoulders or arms. So it's a little bit of a slower burn or pace in the beginning stages with the bass for that reason. So I tell students, be patient, don't give up, it will come, but it's not like the piano where you just go over and you press a key and you get that sound, instant gratification. It's going to take a little bit longer with the bass.
Oh, that's super interesting.
Yeah, but the payoff is that the bass is like an instrument that's in almost every style of music. And it's such a versatile instrument that if you play it and you can play it well, you'll always have musical opportunities regardless of your, how far you want to take it, even if you're just an enthusiast or if you go pro or you just are a more advanced player, there's always somebody who needs a bass player. So that's a beautiful thing because not all in, you don't hear that about violins. so,
Right. I know. There's so many of us.
so there can be some advantages to the turtle winning the race, so to speak.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, I love that. That's a good plug for more bassists in the world. I
Yeah,
know that
yeah,
in the Suzuki world for sure, it's just starting to grow. I feel
yeah,
like it'd be more visible to me.
yeah,
So it's exciting.
very much so. Yes.
Very exciting. Absolutely. Well, I always like to leave people with some practice tip for the week ahead. And we've talked about a lot of tips in this episode.
Yes.
So I was thinking it would be fun to hear what is motivating you right now in your own practice, or when you are most motivated. What is the thing that gets you in the practice room or gets you excited about music these days?
So when I practice, I like to play songs from the Suzuki books as my warm up. And I will try and challenge myself by playing them in a different position on my instrument or playing them like an octave higher on the bass. And I also, which is fun, if you do a bunch in a row up higher than you usually play them, like up in thumb position. That's a great way to warm up your hands in the case of the bass. But another one is because, well, Gary Carr just passed, who's our great classical bassist, who was actually the bass player that recorded the first 3 CDs of the Suzuki bass books. And I've encouraged students just play along with Gary Carr on the recordings. That's also a fun way to warm up or just get started. Like if you're not sure you're ready to look at something else, you can just put on a recording and just start playing along. So those are two things that I like to do as in terms of getting warmed up and start some practicing, just very light, easy, fun thing. And the last tip I'll say, and this is probably a little bit more for bass players or students that play bigger instruments, but have your instrument out of its case at home and have it set up either in a stand or nose in the corner, ready to play, because 50% of getting started is getting that instrument out of the bag. If you can have it, take it out as soon as you get home, you're much more likely to pick up your instrument and begin playing than you are if the case stays on.
Oh, I love that tip so much. I so agree with that. My own violin sits on a hanger in my practice space.
It really helps.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I do think, one of the advantages of a piano, for example, is it's just there. And parents will tell me, oh, the piano, they just sit down and play it. And they're not doing that with their instrument. But maybe their instrument has to come out of the case, like you're saying, and the piano's just there ready to play. There's such a big thing about that.
Exactly. Easy access.
Easy access, yes. And if your child's young and you don't want them touching it without you being there, you can have a way to have it out, but maybe not reachable or accessible to them.
Yeah, or you can have like a little area that's like, this is our practice corner and there's a gate here.
Right.
And then when we come in, this is when we're going to play. But it's ready to go. I think it makes it a lot easier.
Absolutely. Yeah. Such a great
Yeah.
tip. Well, thank you so much, Sherry, for being here with us. It was delightful to speak with you and hear your practice tips. And I know a lot of people will get a lot out of this and have some new ideas to try in their practice this week.
Well, thanks so much for having me. This was really fun.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Before we go today, here are a few of my takeaways from today's episode. First, be realistic about how much time you have to practice and make a plan to use your time as effectively as possible. I love how Sherry talked about how she coaches her students through that process. So, ideally, work with your teacher to identify what to practice on those days when you only have a short time to get your practice in, so you can get the most out of the practice time you do have. Second, feeling like there is no end to practice can be overwhelming. This is so important to keep in mind for everyone. I would say, especially very young children, but it does apply to people of all ages. This also came up in episode 61 when Catherine Drake came on the podcast. And Drake had a great perspective to share on this topic as well. So if you have not heard that episode or have not heard it in a while, I will add a link to that in the show notes if you want to check that out as a next step after listening today. Finally, it can't be said enough that a short daily practice is often more effective than trying to cram all your practice into 1 or 2 longer sessions. It's always great to have the time and freedom to have longer sessions a couple days of the week, but it's really worth it to get to our instrument, even if it's very short, on the days in between, as many days as we can. I loved all of Sherry's advice on music practice, and especially loved some of her discussion and perspective on sharing the physicality of playing the string bass and some of the different needs that students have based on that. So that was something I learned that was new today. That makes a lot of sense. I'd love to hear what you took away, or even what you tried in your own practice this week based on today's conversation. You can send me an email, Christine@SuzukiTriangle.com, or message me on Instagram. My handle's @SuzukiTriangle there. Before we go, I want to thank everyone who has subscribed to the podcast on our new YouTube channel, or any place you stream your podcast for that matter. I'd love you to help me get to my first 50 subscribers on YouTube and beyond that if possible. So I'd love you to go there and subscribe to my channel. I can put a link to that in our show notes as well. Next week, I will be joining you with 10 things I have learned, or 10 ways my perspective has changed since starting this podcast, and what will be 100 episodes next week when that goes live. So I look forward to being back with you to share some of those lessons that can apply to all of our own music practice, or that with the young musicians in our lives that we support. In the meantime, thank you for all you do to support the development of the musicians in your life. Learning and participating in music is such a gift to young people for so many reasons, and what you do each day matters. If no one else tells you this week, I want to give you a big thank you on behalf of everyone in your life you are supporting in music. All right, everyone. Take very good care of yourself this week. See you soon.